It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
And Derek Bell. Welcome into another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Alan Saunders. Below us, certainly not below us in terms of people that do Steelers content, is Derek Bell, Steelers DB.
He's riding shotgun. DB? It's like I'm over here driving the van. Smitty's sitting shotgun, and DB's he's back there in the back. He's in the middle,
hanging out.
Just poking his head up in the rearview mirror.
Based off Derek and I's height discrepancies, I feel like I should give him shotgun, and I could be in the back chilling.
Yeah, that might work better.
Doing whatever.
Can you rearrange the boxes? I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if you can make that happen. There it is.
This is the assortment here.
There it is. That's better. That's better.
All right.
Throw me all off now. I don't know if I like that or not.
Yeah, we're going back to the original way. Just in your mind.
I'm getting whiplash.
Yeah. All right,
yeah. Love it. Yeah, DB joining the show for us today. Actually, that was just last week that DB and I were doing the show together, but obviously the three of us, this is the first time that it's been the three of us.
The people love them some Derek Bell. We got like so many good comments.
Anytime. It's
a man of the people. They love him.
Very undeserved.
Well, we ask for comments. We ask for comments every time that we do a show. Obviously, we want questions for the show. We want comments about what we talked about. But like anytime that Derek is on, that doesn't happen because the comments are just love seeing DB on here. Need more of DB. Like, great. But what's your question for the next show? Or what did you like about this show specifically? Nope, doesn't matter. DB was on it, so they like it.
We're giving the people what they want. We're continuing our Friends-uary. We're having some guests in here to try to get through the slow times, and we got a little news to talk about today. Not a whole lot. Maybe. It was pretty slow.
It could turn into bigger news if this plays out potentially.
Right. So you want to set it up, Smitty?
Yeah, so it was announced that the first week of the NFL season, we always know that the NFL season kicks off on a Thursday. The following day, on Friday, the Philadelphia Eagles will be the host team for a game in Brazil. So obviously that will count as a home game for the Philadelphia Eagles. The Pittsburgh Steelers are one of their away opponents. So theoretically, the Steelers could play in Brazil to open up their 2024 season. And Alan, you mentioned that obviously I want to get your guys' thoughts on this too, but like the fan response to this, I think has just been something that I didn't necessarily see. I expected more of this, like, and again, continuing the conversation with international games in general, when the Steelers lose a home game in the near future to like Mexico City or something, potentially as early as 2025, I expected this type of response then, but like, what do we care about where they're playing an away game? Like, I think this is cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are only, of course, the Eagles have 9 home games. They only ever make teams with 9 home games host. So the Eagles giving up a home game, so they'll have 9, opponents that it technically could be. But the NFL isn't going to make them give up a divisional game, so you can kind of cross Dallas, Washington, New York off that list. And they also play the Carolina Panthers and the Jacksonville Jaguars, both of which are playing in Europe next season. So they're not going to make those guys go on 2 international trips. That really leaves only 4 real options for the visiting team for this game in Sao Paulo, which will be the Steelers, the Browns, the Packers, and the Falcons. So one of those 4 teams basically is going to start their season in Brazil. It'll be a Friday night game the day after that season opening Thursday night game. And I looked at that and I was like, cool. And then there was, I don't know, a lot of anger from the fan base about the Steelers potentially going to Brazil, which I didn't really understand. So I don't know, what's your It's not like it's harder to win the game. Both teams got to go there, and I mean, I guess it makes it more difficult to win the next one, I suppose. But the smart thing on the NFL's part, making that game the first week of the season, they can go down early, be totally ready to go. That's way better, I think, than trying to squeeze in. It's the same time zone, maybe 1 hour time zone difference. That's way better to me than trying to squeeze in a trip to London in the middle of the season.
Yeah, I mean, that was my first reaction to it as well, especially with, like you said, it being an away game. I was kind of curious on why so many people were up in arms. If it was a home game, I'd definitely get that. But, doing it on week 1 is kind of cool. Like you said, because of the travel, I think it just makes it flow better for scheduling purposes. But also, think about we all, even though like we're all like incredibly busy, especially when football season begins, but think about how excited we are for football season to roll around, and then we'll end up getting what, the second game, because there'll be a Thursday night game, and then the Steelers would end up playing on Friday. That just means we don't have to wait 2 additional days like all the other fan bases or all the other media outlets out there. So to me, getting it out there early, with it being week 1, I definitely don't see a problem with it. If it was like middle of the season and stuff, like I definitely think there are some drawbacks, like you said, with the schedule. But to start off the season in Brazil, I mean, pretty cool. I mean, not losing a home game, no big deal for me.
You get 2
I'd like to
extra
know the
days
player
for the
response
travel
to
back.
it.
Yeah, like
that's why I'm curious about the players.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see what the players had to say, but I think it's way better than going to London or going to Germany. I mean, maybe not in terms of like, I mean, obviously Brazil's beautiful, but it's not necessarily like the first class accommodations. I'm sure the NFL is going to find no matter what, but it's not the same kind of place, right? But I think I don't know. I don't understand the downside. Really, you got to play these games. The NFL is committed to it. I guess that maybe is the negativity just that people don't like the idea of international games in general, that they just don't want to be a part of this?
As like even just a fan of football, let's take the Steelers part out of this. Like, I'm just excited that we're going to have football that first weekend, Thursday, Friday, Sunday, Monday. Now, like, you're talking 4 to 5 days with NFL football, which is sweet. But I think it is just like the negative drawbacks that people have to international games in general, maybe playing into this. And again, just knowing that like it's coming down the pipeline for the Steelers to lose a home game, even if it's not right now. Again, could be one season later with Mexico City. If there ever is, a game in Ireland, certainly the Steelers would be on the short list to be the first team to host there. So I think it is probably just a result of how the fans feel about international games in general, as opposed to like, oh, this specific one, them being the road team for.
Yeah, I think too, like people, I don't think I understand, like, the NFL initiative is obviously to grow the game, but just how many Steelers fans are in different countries of the United States. I mean, the Steelers have an incredible fan base. It's not just one of those things where they travel extremely well. Steelers fans are pretty much everywhere. So you got to think about how cool, how beneficial it'll be for Steelers fans in Brazil to be able to see their team play maybe for the first time ever. You think about how expensive it is to travel overseas, outside the country, whatever. Having the Steelers potentially come to their backyard, I'm sure would be cool for those fans. So to me, I don't really see it. I think it's good for the game, good to grow for the game. Obviously, the Steelers are one of the most, historic franchises in all of sports, and, using them to help elevate the NFL's platform, I think is a good thing.
There are 19.7 million people in Brazil that follow NFL accounts on social media. That is the most of any country other than the United States and Mexico.
Wow.
So like, there's a lot of NFL fans, and I think there's good.
I was gonna say, what is the reason that they haven't been part of the international plan already? Then, do you think?
Well, I mean, I think part of it is like the part of the international plan is to make money, and Brazil's not a developing country that doesn't have a great economy. So I don't know how well the NFL is going to be able to monetize those 20 million people, right? Like, I think if you're the NFL and you're like, well, we have 5 million Brits and 6 million Germans and 20 million Brazilians, like which one of those groups has deeper pockets? I don't know. It's probably the European countries, right? I mean, I think that makes some sense. But I do think there are this to me kind of feels like a trial run as opposed to them sort of going full on into Europe and saying like, hey, we're going to be here every year. This is a regular commitment. Like, yeah, we're doing this thing. This very much to me feels like a little bit of a weather balloon, just to see like, hey, will people pay for these tickets? What we need to price them to make money? Is there a market there that is not just interest, but support for the product financially? I don't know. I'm obviously not an expert on Brazilian economics, but I think that's probably why this is like a, hey, we'll do it once and see what happens kind of thing from the league. But certainly when you see those numbers, it's obvious that's a big potential market.
Yeah. Okay, you might have just answered the question, and that's all that it is. It's just like they're only locked into one game. It's not like an agreement to do like, say, like a back-to-back type thing or like a 5-year plan or anything like that. That's not how this is done.
I think they announced the intention to play just one, and then maybe there's an option for a second. No, that's it. No, it was so they had a sort of competition or whatever, a discussion about who was going to get the next, which country was going to go next, and it's Brazil. It gets 2024, and then there's another game that they're going to play in 2025 that Brazil was also up for that they now are saying could go to Spain. So yeah, it just seems like this is kind of right now a one-time thing. We'll see how it goes. That'd be cool to play in like the only game ever in Brazil. Not that I'm hoping it doesn't work, but like that'd be kind of fun to go there once and be like, yeah, we were there. I'll tell you what, man, I get retweeted on social media all the time by like there's like Brazilian Steelers accounts. There are those in every language, but I feel like the Brazilian ones are especially common where like they have like big followings that I get retweeted in Portuguese all the time. Then I'm like, what are they saying about me? Google Translate, tell me what's up. But it's kind of cool.
Honestly, those accounts too, they're like really good at aggregating. Like those are some of the best
yeah.
aggregators within this, because like
well, they have to aggregate everything because it's all in the wrong language. You need somebody that not just speaks the language, but the language of sport. I think that's one of the things that's really underrated, difficult. I used to cover baseball. We'll talk to a lot of Latin baseball players that speak Spanish, but the one interpreter is like, man, I did my like study abroad for my degree in Spain. Like what these guys are talking about is not all the technical terms that you get in sports are very unique to understanding something that's written in a foreign language. So it's very difficult to do that. And I think those accounts do a really good job of it, of sort of getting that information out. There's obviously Spanish language ones too. The Steelers are huge in Mexico. And I really suspect that the Steelers will not be going to Brazil because they will be hosting a game in Mexico City in 2025. And the NFL won't make them go international back-to-back years. That's what I really think is going to happen. So I would kind of lean towards the Browns. They've only been international once, and it was back in 2017. And so I think that's probably the way I would predict this. But certainly, if there's only 4 possible teams, you got to take the Steelers' chances of being there seriously.
Yeah, for sure.
You're telling me
it's going to be interesting.
Lose a home game?
It's going to be interesting to see. I think the fan reaction to the Steelers losing a home game will be much more intense than what we've seen just over on social media over the past couple of days. And that, to an extent, I do get it from everybody else's perspective, season ticket holders, all that stuff. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. Like you said, huge following in Mexico.
Yeah,
I bet you the price of the tickets still go up.
Every team does have to give up a home game once every 8 years as part of the change to the 17-game schedule. So the Steelers don't get an option. They have to go along with it. It's part of what the league agreed to, or what they agreed to, in the CBA. And so they will lose a home game once every 8 years for an international game. It's just a question of when it happens to come up. And the reason that the NFL hasn't been in Mexico City in 23 and 24 is that the stadium in Mexico City that they've played in before, Azteca, which is where they play the Mexican soccer national team games, is being renovated to host the World Cup in 2026, and so it hasn't been available. They didn't want to play somewhere else because they have an arrangement there with the local team, the soccer team that runs the scheduling there, and so they're planning to go back to Azteca in 2025, and as long as that renovation happens on time, I really expect that the Steelers will be going there, not this coming season, but the next one.
My question, before we get into questions from other people, would you cover such a game, Alan? Would you be there?
Yeah, I have this asked to me on social media. I would have to look at how much and like what arrangements were being handled by the Steelers in the league compared to what I would need to do on my own. If they make it really easy to cover and it doesn't cost that much, I would love to do it. I love to travel. But at the end of the day, it generally becomes a financial decision. They can't be spending thousands and thousands of dollars to cover one regular season game. It's just, we're not that big of a company. And so it would really depend on, how easy they made it for us and how expensive it ended up being. But I would love to.
Yeah, no, seems like it would be awesome. Actually, I wanted to bring up a question from YouTube. Steve wanted to know. So Nick was on here with us yesterday, Derek, talking a lot about Arthur Smith and like some of the drawbacks to the offense. There's obviously some positives and negatives to take away, but the one thing specifically that he highlighted in a negative fashion was his drop back passing game. And Steve, who commented here, says, "Why do you say Arthur Smith doesn't have a good drop back passing game? Can you explain and give examples to this? Offense seemed to work okay in Tennessee. Not saying you're wrong here, just would like some education on it."
Yeah, I mean, I think it's difficult to show examples without being able to pull up plays specifically. But I think really in general, the drop back passing game stuff that I've seen just looks really basic. So they're running every team runs the same concepts, right? Like for the vast majority of it, like you have your set probably 7 or 8 concepts that probably are universal across the NFL. There's not very much designery type stuff that you would see in some of the other high-powered offenses, in my opinion. That I think his sequencing with plays can be a drawback, but really just the spacing is oftentimes really poor. I also think that in Atlanta, and I don't want to throw Atlanta coaches under the bus, but one of the things that I really noticed was their receivers don't run very hard on every play. So if players don't think they're getting the ball, for example, Smith will run some dagger concepts. So you'll have basically a clear out to clear out the safety, just running straight down the field. There was spacing problems quite frequently because the person running the clear out was running about 65%. And the person running the dig right behind him was running 100%. So they were basically running into each other. And when the ball was thrown, you couldn't even really tell who the ball was going to. So there's coaching stuff like that to me where it's the spacing of it. It's just there's not most of the schemed open stuff that you see is off play action. And I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that because I do think it puts guardrails on the offense. And as long as they can run the ball, there's a chance that this can really work. But if you're asking me, are they going to be for example, the Steelers are not in the top 12, 10 probably in rushing success rate or running the ball next year. They're not going to be a good offense. That's just not his strength.
Yeah, I think Derek really hit on something that I've noticed is that when the offense is in, whether it's play action or not, when the offense is in a mode that the defense has to respect the run, it seems like things will work. It's not great. It's not super, you're oh my God, my mind's blown. Look how clever. It's pretty basic stuff. But where it really falls apart is where it gets into some of those more obvious pass situations. It just doesn't seem like they really have answers for that in the offense that I've seen. The spacing stuff is weird. Some of the same stuff we saw with Canada, honestly, talking about 2 guys in the same place and things like that. But I don't think it's unfixably bad. But I guess I question where does the improvement come from, right? I mean, what is the reason that Arthur Smith, after 2 years as an OC and 3 years as a head coach calling the plays, what is the thing or the reason that causes him to get better now? I don't know. I just kind of would need to see it before I would believe it's going to happen.
So that's kind of the thing, right? Some of these veteran coaches, guys that have failed at their first head coaching spot or coordinators that have flamed out for various reasons, sometimes you'll see them come back to the league and get another opportunity and they kind of reinvent themselves. Smith does have a reputation, whether that's fair or not. There's a lot of scoring fans, I feel like, in Atlanta, just judging off the comments that I've got on my own YouTube channel, that think that, Smith's one of those guys that he's kind of just thinks he's the smartest guy in the room. And that's definitely a thing in the coaching world. He definitely would not be the first coach to fall into that category. But I think it's interesting too, because Smith's coming off this 3-year, experiment in Atlanta that ended extremely poorly. It would be different if Atlanta failed on the defensive side of the ball only, but his offense is just over the grand scheme of things, weren't an overwhelming strength. And that's really his calling card. So it's going to be interesting to me, what he learns from that experience, if he does change anything of his philosophy, or if he's kind of a guy that's going to try to come in and install his system and what kind of tweaks come along with that. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see. I do think that I said it on Twitter. I do think that this can work. I just think that it's going to be different than what people are probably going to be expecting.
Yeah, we got a question on Twitter that kind of goes right along this from the Based Yinzer, which is a a great Twitter name. Realistic outlook for Pickett this year. Man, that's a tough question to answer. I don't even know how I would dig into that like scientifically, but maybe just on gut and feeling. DB, what do you got?
Man, I'm gonna let y'all go first on that because if I start it off, I'm gonna end up setting the mood bad. So I'm gonna let Zach go first on that one.
Can he finish the season as the starter? That's what I want to know. The expectation is the really tough part of this because I remember when you were getting like flamed going into like this past season for what you projected him to do, just as a year 2 quarterback in this league, looking at historical tendencies for a guy that did what he did.
Oh, by the way, I predicted it have an 82 passer rating, and he had an 81.4. So
yeah. Exactly. I have no idea. Like, this is really bad to give this type of. I don't know what to expect. Like, I don't know how we've seen him do what he's done through his first 2 seasons, like even taking into account the missed time within those 2 seasons, and have any expectation for you. Like, I don't have an expectation. That's the problem.
Yeah, it's really hard to develop, I think, a realistic expectation. Look, I mean, I think one of them is like, how could we expect him to be healthy? He played, he had 2 concussions and then 3 injuries this past year. Like, that's almost just as concerning as the play. I think one of the things that I think is that we will see more efficient numbers because I think the running game will be more emphasized, will be better, and I think we will get more play action, which I think just about everyone's been screaming for, and I think that will lead to more easy throws to open guys for big chunks. I just don't know that it's going to add up to more yards or like they can operate more efficiently and not really be better, right? Like they can just not really throw the ball very often but do it pretty well when they do. I think I don't know if that's a reasonable outcome, but I kind of feel like that's an above average outcome for how this offense could play out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that some of the stuff that y'all are saying is definitely valid. The health concerns are definitely real. I mean, at this point, just with his struggles, like how many times he's exited the game due to injury. It's tough for me because I think that there's a couple of different scenarios that could happen here. One is that, an injury happens or like he just doesn't grasp the offense or doesn't pick it up as quickly as possible. And, we're 4 weeks into the season and whichever veteran starter they bring in, is it Mason or whoever, there's just so much pressure that they end up, having to go a different direction. They can't wait on him to pick it up. That being said, like I just think that the offense, like I said about the guardrails in the offense that are kind of in place for the quarterback, this is there's a lot of like point and shoot type stuff in the offense that I think minimizes some of the stuff that he kind of struggles with in terms of like being a processor. One thing that Smith likes to do is like cut the field in half. So sometimes that lends itself to spacing issues in itself, but there's some half field reads I think that are really beneficial. They run a lot of like play action max protection looks where there's only like 2 receivers out in the concept. So like, again, you're not having to read like full pure progression reads like right to left to right. I think that stuff can be good for him. The big difference for me is going to be like when Arthur Smith comes in, like he's trying to tweak his offense to like fit his personnel. Like every offensive coordinator will say like, hey, I got to fit my offense to my personnel. What is there right now to grasp onto with Pickett's skill set that you can say like, okay, I can build the offense around this? Like, what does he do at an above average level that he's shown so far that you can really build the ship out of or build like, what is it? I don't really know what that is. I just, and that's like something that I've asked myself, like even watching his games, like, I mean, I've watched every pass he's thrown dating back to his like sophomore year in college. Most of those 2-3 times, I don't know what he does at a high level to really build the offense around. So I do think that there is stuff in his offense to make it easier. I'm still really skeptical on like the ceiling of things, but I do think that they can get workable quarterback play from Pickett in this offense just because of how quarterback friendly it is.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that maybe the one thing you could kind of point to, maybe not necessarily that like Pickett does specifically. The one thing I think he does specifically pretty well, his back shoulder ball is pretty good. I think that's something that maybe I haven't seen as much of out of the Smith tape that I've watched that they could put into it, especially because George Pickens is so good at it too. Like those 2 guys seem to have a real connection there. I think that makes some sense. And I like Pickett's ability in the kind of 2-minute drill. Like that's sort of an Achilles heel of this style of offense, right? Is that if you're building your offense with the running game and with play action pass, like you shouldn't expect that offense to be able to score quickly. But that's maybe the one area where Kenny has been reliably pretty good in his career, is kind of directing those late drives. So maybe this can be, I'm not expecting it to be great, but maybe this could be a marriage where the sum is greater than the measure of the parts.
So real quick, this is just actually something that I looked up earlier this morning. But I was sitting there watching. I watched 6 games from Atlanta last year, 2 games from the year before, and then I went back and watched like 3 Titans games over the past like week ish. And one of the things I kept like seeing was like there was the occasional Drake London like 50-50 ball that they would give him the opportunity on the outside. But I just didn't really see a lot of like vertical routes from the boundary. Like a lot of the shot plays are like, deep crossers. They'll run some clear out stuff, but they really want to work, the middle of the field. The way they push the ball down the field is just different from what we've seen from the Steelers. Just looking at Sports Info Solutions, and just in terms of like looking at like 9 routes, so like go balls, the Falcons ran 50 go ball routes last year. That was dead last in the NFL by 25. The Packers had 75. The Steelers, on the other hand, they ran 174, and that's on very, very low volume. So, I mean, it's going to be, like I said, it's going to look so different. And like you said, like maybe this is something like I do think that Kenny's a relatively accurate deep ball thrower. Maybe, that's something they incorporate maybe more in this offense. But, a lot of that, I think the lack of just like true, go balls or back shoulders in the offense can be relegated back to the fact that Smith uses like the tightest splits, like really of any team in the league. Like you see the receivers, they're almost really, really close to the line of scrimmage. I mean, it's difficult to throw those like back shoulders when you're that close to the line. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. I'm fascinated, honestly, just because I've enjoyed, even though this offense that he runs is definitely not my favorite. Like he was not my favorite choice of the coordinators that were available. I have enjoyed like learning about it. I think that it can work with the right circumstances, with the right personnel. I'm just fascinated to see like what he does with Kenny, assuming that that's their plan going into next season as he's quarterback 1. I'm very fascinated to see what he can get out of him.
Derek, we want to take some time to talk about you. We're doing this with all our guests this month who are coming along for a ride with us here on the afternoon drive. And we talked a lot about like fans and where they're from. And you are a Steelers fan that is not from Pittsburgh. How'd that happen?
Yeah. So, my father actually, who is a listener to the channel,
All right.
and he,
What's up, Mr. Bell?
he literally grew up. He was born in 1970, so he grew up with the 70s Steelers dynasty. So pretty easy kind of correlation right there. And he really just stuck with it. So like I always tell people, did I want to become a Steelers fan when I was growing up, all that stuff. I always tell people, man, like I didn't have a choice. Like, dude, I remember like watching Steelers games with him when I was 3-4 years old, like Cordell Stewart era. I don't really know if I had a choice to like choose a team, but I mean, that was just what I rode with. So really, I've been, obsessed with football, played football growing up, but I've been obsessed with it since I could walk. So just going to Steelers games with him and pretty easy thing to latch onto.
How did you get to a place where you wanted to do what you're doing now? Talk about football online, write about it, do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, man, like how everything kind of transpired. So like I think I joined Twitter in like 2011, and just like this was right after I was getting out of high school, and as I was getting older and stuff, I wasn't going to play football in college or anything like that. But I just wanted to continue to like learn about it. So like I remember, early in like the 2010s, just like seeking out like knowledge, just trying to like further my knowledge of the game. And then, I started I think it was like 2012, 2013. I started really like trying to like give my own opinions on stuff. I had a really small like following on there. But I've always been obsessed with the NFL draft. That was something that me and my dad watched, growing up. So like I've kind of always latched onto that, like just like learning about the players. And I love watching college football, obviously, too. So then like 2012, 2013 is like really when I started like putting out clips, and like I remember like screen sharing stuff of like highlight reels and stuff about players in the draft, just getting to learn like background info. And then really from there it's just kind of like grown. Like I have people like that still follow me, still have conversations with on a regular basis that have followed me like since that 2013, 2014 stuff. And then really, I didn't start like really writing until about 2019, 2020. Like everything that I did was really just Twitter. Like there were so many people that know me just from Twitter, like not from any particular site or anything like that. It's just kind of over time, it's just kind of gradually evolved into, me having the kind of following that I have now.
Well, I want to ask you a last thing. This is specific. I think I know the answer, but for everybody else, what is your favorite position to watch in terms of film and scouting, and why is it?
Oh man, it's definitely corner, man. I know. I think that's one thing that kind of makes me a little unique in that regard. I mean, like when I was growing up, like in middle school, AU, high school, whatever. I mean, I played corner and receiver, so I think naturally a lot of people that are a lot better at, analyzing the game than I am gravitate towards like what they know. So like I think a lot of that just stems from like what you played and if you have that experience. So it's kind of just one of those things that like I've known for a long time. Like I had some really good coaches that were like played those positions, and it's just always been like the coolest thing for me. Like it's really funny, and like my dad would be the first one to tell you. I remember specifically going to Steelers games in like 2005 and during their playoff run, and like I'm not even watching the game. Like when they're on defense, I'm literally just watching Ike Taylor. So like my dad would be sitting next to me, and I'd be like telling him like, "Did you see that? Did you see that?" And he'd be like, "No, I'm like watching like the quarterback, and like I'm watching what's going on with the ball." And I'm just like telling him like all the stuff that just happened and stuff. So like I was always growing up, like Ike was my favorite player. So like that was just something that, I wore 24, all that stuff. So that's just how that's kind of evolved. And I do think it's just something that I really enjoy. I know a lot of people don't really enjoy watching like secondary guys because the ball doesn't come their way very often throughout the game. But I mean, if it was up to me, man, I would watch freaking 25, 30 corners in a draft class if I had the time.
It's funny that, I love Ike Taylor too, but it'd be funny like to a casual fan, like, oh, you wearing 24 for like Champ Bailey or no, Ike Taylor.
Big Ike Taylor guy, by the way.
Yeah. It's actually really funny. I had the chance to I think it was my wife and I went to Steelers training camp, like this was probably 8-9 years ago. I actually had a chance to meet him for the first time. And he was really cool with this time, like signed some stuff for me that I brought to camp. And then like when I was covering camp 2 years ago, I had the chance to have a conversation with him, and I like thanked him personally for like, setting aside some time to come over and talk with me after practice. He took some pictures with me and stuff. And then we literally just sat there and talked ball for like probably 7-8 minutes. Like we talked about just like Steelers defense, like things that he did, like growing up to like, develop himself. Like we talked about, how he told me that he really wants to be like in the Steelers Ring of Honor or Hall of Honor, whatever they call it. He said he thinks that that'll happen eventually. It's just not his time yet. And just some of the stuff that he was helping with his son, his son's he's committed to Notre Dame as a defensive back as well. So, that like 7-8 minute conversation, like the couple times I've been grateful enough to like have those with him, it's been really cool. So kind of another full circle moment for me.
That's awesome. Love to hear it. Derek, thanks for riding shotgun with us today. I think most people that are watching or listening to the show know where to find you. It's also on the screen if you're watching, but just go ahead and tell the people anyway where they can find your stuff.
Yep, at Steelers_DB on Twitter and YouTube. Appreciate y'all for having me on too.
The YouTube, by the way, that video that you just did about Arthur Smith, was it? I think that was the sale cons. It had like 30K. I was looking at it. I was like, oh, it just popped up. I didn't even see the video at first. Was it the sale concept one that got like 30K?
It did. It did very well. I was happy.
Like and subscribe over there to our boy Alan. Tell the people where they can find you.
At @ASaunders_PGH, PGH Steelers Now, SteelersNow.com, and right here in this square all week. We got more friends coming in. Should we tease tomorrow's friend or should we not?
Maybe tease. I wouldn't say specifically who it is.
Okay, tease. Yeah. How will we tease this? Man, that's.
I might have to eat.
Nah, that's too obvious. I think.
Yeah, probably.
I'll say this guy has a great beard. Let's just say that is a great. We're gonna go back to the.
Unlike me,
we're keeping the beard quota up in lieu of Smitty's, which is on hiatus. We had Nick, we got Derek, we've got now we are keeping the beard theme going. Let's just say that. All right.
Yeah, mine would have been way too obvious, so I'm glad I didn't come out of my mouth. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell here. Hit us in the comments with any questions for tomorrow, for going forward, any thoughts about what we talked about. Leave us a 5-star review, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts from. I'm Zachary Smith, PGH, for Alan Saunders, for Derek Bell, and for myself. Thanks for jumping in. Take another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.